Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we would do a list. A few weeks ago, Variety put out a top 100 movies of all time list, and we went through it together. If you saw that video, if not, just refer back in my channel, you'll find that video. And it inspired me to do my own list of the top 100 movies of all time, and I've just finished it. I was just doing all the editing for it, and Um, it's quite long, actually. It's like four videos of about 90 minutes each, going through between 30 and 35 uh, selections for each part, right? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up a part at a time, and then put the whole video up as one large video, which would probably be around 6 hours long. So, but how did I come to this list? Well, the funny thing about the variety list is when I went through it. Um, it's just too small of a list, I think, because what's striking about their list is not the movies that they have on their list, but the movies that are absent from their list, right? So I think if you make any any list of the top 100 films of all time, you're going to be missing out on so many films, right? You could probably do a top 1,000 uh, list, all right, and I don't think anybody would argue with any of those 1,000 films thinking that film is like one of the greatest films of all time, right? So that's how many really good movies are. Because what film is what? It's over 100 years now. It's over 100 years old now. And if you're thinking just from the output that the Americans do when it comes to film, I mean that's thousands upon thousands of films every year, right? Uh, and then you think of all the other countries around the world that are producing films as well, and you can see that probably in the history of cinema, there's what hundreds of thousands of films, if not millions, right? So um, how can you put that down to 100 films, right? It's extremely difficult. But two things are on your side when you do it. Number one is out of all those millions of films, you probably haven't watched all of them, right? So you can exclude every film that you haven't watched out of your list, right? The second is, um, unless you've gone back, well, is probably part of the first as well. If you've gone back all the films that you haven't seen because they came out before you were born and you never bothered going back in the history of cinema to watch, that would be another thing. But anyway, so with me, okay, what I did was, okay, I started to put a list together. All right, I put a list together because I wanted to make a top 100 list, like the variety list. So I put a list together of all the films that I think are great, right? And that ended up being like in the over like three or 400 range, like in between 300 and 400 films, right? So I said, how am I gonna reduce this down to 100? It's like every film that I look that I'm gonna delete off the list to shrink it down to 100. I'm going, yeah, but I can't take that film off. That film is really good, right? Um, and so I said, okay, there's got to be a way that I can do this. And so what I did was I said, okay, um, I'm gonna make this list um, with movies from directors, but a director can't have more than one movie. All right. So, um, because if you think about it, let's say you take, let's say, who like Martin Scorsese, let's say maybe Stanley Kubrick, maybe who else? Alfred Hitchcock, Steven Spielberg. All right. Just take those four, right? And they probably have, you know, four or five films that could make a top 100 list each, right? So that would be like 20 something films already, right? And that's like 20% of your list right there. And it's only four directors. And, there's thousands of directors. So I said, what if I take those 300 plus films and I take out all the films and only choose one film from each director? What would happen? And so I did that, and that reduced it, it halved it, at least more than halved it, right? So what I did was I squirmed and I got it down, but I couldn't get it down to anything under the lowest I could make it and still um, feel good about the list is 130. So I got it down to 130. All right, but I just couldn't leave it at 130. I just couldn't do it. So what I decided to do was, well, what I'll do is I'll list 130 directors with their 130 movies that I think is their best movie or the one that I enjoyed the most. And then what I'll do is if there's any other films that they've done, which usually there are, right, that could make that 130 list as well, I'll just mention them when I'm going through the video. So let's say I have this movie, but this director also has these three other movies that are really good that you could replace that movie with and put it in the list, and nobody would bat an eye. That's what I did. I just gave you a list. So basically, what happened is the list is really 130 movies, but there's a little bit more than 400 after that that I also mentioned. But I don't go in depth on any of those films. I just talk about the film that I enjoy that made my top 130 list. Now, saying that, there are going to be some films in this list that you probably don't think should make 130 or 100 top 100 list. That's not good enough to make a top 100 list, but I mean, you have to have a bit of personality in your list. Otherwise, it's just a generic list like everybody else. Like if you take 100 people and put them down and say what are the 100 greatest movies of all time, they're going to start listing movies, and every list is going to look like every other list. I mean, if they're knowledgeable about film, they're going to be picking all the same films, right? So what I thought I would pepper or sprinkle some of the films that perhaps aren't the greatest films of all time. Most people won't think that anyways, but I do, right? And that's the personality that I'll put into this list. There'll be some movies in this list that maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe that you've never watched, or you don't know about. I'm not saying there's going to be a large amount of them, but there is going to be a few probably that you haven't watched or haven't seen, or don't know about, or whatever, right? So that'll be my personality in the list because I quite enjoyed them. And one of the criteria of the films that I've put in here that um, is that it's a film that I would go to a desert island with, and I wouldn't mind watching over and over again. If you had only 100 films to go on a desert island, those are the films that you can only watch for the rest of your life. You're going to want to watch films that, yeah, they're good, but um, would you watch them again, right? Are they enjoyable enough to watch again? So that kind of influenced it as well. Not 100% influence on it, but it was an influence in this list as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy this list. Um, and maybe you'll get out of it a bit of film, some films that you haven't seen that you'll go out and search for and watch and see if you enjoy them as well. And if you do, leave a comment down below saying, "Wow, you got really bad taste. How can you think that movie is a great movie? You're retarded or something, right?" Uh, so, but it's my list, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Now, when I when I was doing this, I also had the intention as well is that with only 130 directors, there's so many other directors out there that could make this list as well. So what I did afterwards is I did a list of 50 um, directors and those films, which was another like 200 something films that I was going to mention in this video afterwards. So what I was going to do is I was going to do a countdown top 130 from 130 to 1. And during that time, any director that's in that top 130 that has other films that could make a top 130, I would mention those films as well. And then at the end, I was going to do a top 50 directors list and the films that they have that could have made this list. The director could have made this list, or the movies that I'm mentioning from those directors could have made this list. But then I'm starting to think about it, and I'm going. Just bear with me with this. I know it's a bit long or whatever, right? So, um, because I didn't want to leave out, so you really do need like maybe 1,000 films in order to get a good, you know, all around look at film and all the best, the cream of the crop, right? You need around 1,000 films, I would say, right? Um, so I couldn't just leave it at the 130 directors with 130 films, and then those other films, which ends up popping it up to just over 400 films. So that's still there's so many directors out there that could have made this list. The reason why they didn't make the list is because usually it means either the film that other people really enjoyed and thinks really great, I didn't, or I haven't watched that director yet, right? I haven't seen that director. Maybe it's a European or an Asian director that's hard to find their films, right? Or their films are really expensive if you're going to buy them, right? Um, so those are absent, right? But I said, well, that doesn't seem justifiable. I should at least mention them. So what I was going to do afterwards is after I do the 130 is mention 50 directors and list the films that I would say through reputation anyways, because I haven't seen them, would make 130 top 100 list without anybody batting an eye. But then I started thinking about it and I'm going, well, kind of this list is kind of recommendations, right? The films that you enjoy, you're mentioning to other people, and maybe they'll enjoy as well. So with these 50 directors, probably out of the 50, I may have watched maybe 5 of them, right? And uh, those ones that I did watch, and I watched those films, I wasn't super impressed by the films. Like they were okay. I can understand why some people think they're really great, but I didn't. Like let's say Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, or let's say Bergman's what was the name of that black and white film? What was that film? Yeah, it's slipping my mind, but it was a Bergman film. You know, Bergman's most famous film, right? Anyway, so I'll put it here or whatever, right? Both of those films are considered some of the great in the world. I mean, a lot of people mention Citizen Kane as being the greatest film of all time, right? And the Bergman film is up there as well, right? So, but I've watched them. I didn't impress. One, the Orson Welles film was quite dry, and I'm going, why do people think this is a great film? A lot of people mention, you know, the camera angles and the use of the camera. There was a lot of firsts in that film where they were using. I mean, they dug a hole in the set or whatever, so they could put the camera low to look upwards or whatever, right? The only thing that impressed me about that film that I recall, because it's been a while since I've seen it, was that Rosebud ends up being a sled that Orson Welles had when he was a kid, and that's what this was all about. And then you go, oh, okay, so that was a bit of a surprise or whatever, and sentimental and things like that. Okay, but does it make the whole film good enough because of that? I didn't think so, so I didn't put it in my top 130 list. And the Fellini film was a bit too intellectual for my. Now I'm called the ignorant intellectual, so I like intellectual pursuits, but film I think is a medium that is like set up for entertainment more than anything else, right? I mean, unless you're watching a documentary, right? If you're watching a documentary, then you know the purpose when you're watching this documentary is usually an educational purpose of some sort. You want to learn something about the subject matter of the documentary, right? So you have that mindset. But usually, when you're going to see a movie, usually it's for its entertainment value, right? And it can, you know, I mean, there are a lot of great films that are both entertaining and educational in some way. So they improve your intellect, but they also entertain you at the same time, right? So maybe they hit a subject matter. Like I really like John Q, right, with Denzel Washington. I like that film. It's not in my top 100 list or anything, but that's the film that popped into my head. And that film, you know, it's has a big entertainment value. It's a bit over the top, like uh, a man who needs an operation for his son, or his son's going to die, and hospitals are refusing to give it to him because he doesn't have the right insurance or enough insurance, and he can't pay for it. You know, whether that happens in real life, I'm not sure, but if it does, then you can see the frustration and him going into a hospital with gunpoint to force doctors to save his son, and he'll deal with the consequences afterwards, right? Um, Powerful film, right? How much believable it is. I enjoyed it. It was entertaining, and it also makes you think that you know the Americans have like a really large population of people that are uninsured and have difficulty finding health care, right? And they're a first world country, right? It's you know it's almost I don't know. I'd have to live there, right? I don't live there, so I don't know what exactly. But from what so many people are saying who do live in the United States when it comes to healthcare that the whole thing's broken, right? So anyway, so that film has a message to it, but it's also entertaining. So that kind of film. But the the Bergman film that I watched, uh, I was kind of lost on. It was dry, really dry, and then if you're not in on the point of it, like if you're lost, if it goes over your head or whatever, then I'm not sure if you can really enjoy that film, right? So So maybe I need somebody smarter than me to tell me why that film is really great. And The Seventh Seal, there we go, The Seventh Seal. And educate me, right? But I have read read ups on it, but I watched it and I'm like, I'm not sure if I get this, right? So that one isn't in my list either, but those are just two examples. They would be in the 50 list now, but the thing about it is, like I was saying, was 130 films plus those directors' films that could have made it if I chose a different one of their films, added those ones, got up to over 400. But then I said, well, that's not enough. People need to know about all the great films. So I added another 50 directors I was going to list through and all their films, which was another 200 and something films as well. So the total would be over 800 films. And if you watch those 800 films, you'll have a pretty good idea of cinema worldwide and its history, right? So, uh, but then I'm second guessing myself now because I'm doing a video about 50 directors and listing films by those directors, and I haven't seen most of them. How can I really recommend them? I would only be able to recommend them on reputation, not because I've watched them, right? So it seems kind of disingenuous for me to do that. So I think I'm not going to do that. So I do have a 50 um, list of directors and all their great films, but I don't think I can really recommend you seeing them, even though I bet you 99% of the time I would be correct because, um, uh, when you get so large of a group saying that the film is good and you're a human being and all those people are human beings, usually if you watch it, you'll probably think it's good as well, right? So, um, like when I see a film that's recommended by a large amount of people saying it's really good, and then I watch that film, 9 times out of 10, I find that film really good. Not because they said it was good, because I watched it and I'm a human being. And wow, that was a really good film. I'm glad these people recommended that film to me, right? So, but there are some that just you don't get or whatever, right? So, um, anyway, so that's my talk. So we will go on with the 130 films. So we'll go from 130 up to I think it's 100, and then from 99 to like 34, and we'll do 33 each time. So we'll do a total of 130 because I couldn't shrink it down more than 130. Now, uh, you will see films that you probably think should be in the top 100, top 130 that aren't there. But that's the list. I mean, you can't fit every film in it, right? So that's what I noticed a lot with the variety one as well. But these are personally for me what I think are the greatest films of all time, with a sprinkling of films that I think are great that maybe wouldn't make most people's top 130. But that's the personality part of it, and that's the thing where you can search out those films because maybe you wouldn't watch them because nobody's ever recommended them to you. All right, there's not a huge amount of those ones, but there are a few sprinkled in here or there. Right? All right. So on with the 130, we'll do 31. Now it'll be in four parts because it'll be there's four videos, right? So and then I think maybe I'll put all four of the videos together in one big video and and put it up as well. All right. So uh, see you on the other side in a second. All right, and bye for now. All right, so let's start. As I said, with 130, we'll go up to 129, 128, all the way up to number one. Okay, so 130 is um, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, directed by Zack Snyder and put out in 2004. I actually enjoy this film more than the original by George Romero, even though the original is probably George Romero's best film. But I'm always going back and forth between Dawn of the Dead and you know The Night of the Living Dead, because The Night of the Living Dead was the first film I watched with Romero, and I thought it was really good. But Dawn of the Dead was really good as well. But the Zack Snyder remake of Dawn of the Dead from 2004 stars Canadian Sarah Polley, and I really like her acting, and um, it made the film for me. And the a little bit more action oriented, a little bit more special effects are better than the original, and so the stories are pretty similar. But I watched Dawn of the Dead, the remake, before I watched Dawn of the Dead, the original, and maybe that's the influence that put me over to the top of liking Dawn of the Dead more um, than the original Dawn of the Dead. So number 130 is Dawn of the Dead from 2004 by Zack Snyder. It's basically zombies at a shopping mall, all right? And they're all stuck up on the roof, all right? It's pretty intense. Okay, so next up after that is number 129, and this is the first of a few anime films that have made the list, and it's by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, all right? And it's called Ninja Scroll, and it came out in, I think, 1993, if I remember correctly. All right, so this is basically an adult anime film, all right? So a lot of people don't list any anime films in their top list because um, they relegate anime film, just like animation films, to, for like children's films, right? And children's films don't count kind of idea, right? So, um, but I don't do that. A lot of anime is actually directed towards adults, not towards children. I would not let my 6-year-old son watch Ninja Scroll because it's not meant for him. It's meant for, you know, an adult. All right. And it's basically about like a swordsman. His name is Jubei, if I remember his name correctly. And he ends up fighting these 8 different magical creatures or whatever that, evil creatures that are trying to kill him. And he joins up with so these evil creatures are working for a guy, and they want to overthrow. Now this is taking place in Edo, Japan, back in the 16 or 1700s, and there's like a shogunate power that rules all of Japan at the time, and these evil creatures are trying to take over. Their leader or whatever is trying to take over that shogunate, and Jubei kind of falls into this thing, but he's pushed along by this old man who is like a government agent, who helps him along, and he ends up being joined by this girl ninja who has poison for blood, something along those lines. Anybody that touches her will be poisoned by her. So her sweat and her blood and everything else is all poisonous. So and she joins Jubei in fighting these evil creatures, and they go through and anyways, it's quite a fun film to watch. Lots of action. The anime is really good in it. Kawajiri also wrote. It was based on a manga. I'm not sure if the manga is the same name. I don't think it's called Ninja Scroll. But Kawajiri also wrote this film as well. So he both directed it and wrote it. So it's extremely good. And so, like I said, I'm going to mention other films. If they have other films, like Zack Schneider didn't have any other films that I would put in the top 100, 130. He did probably his best is probably Justice League, other than Dawn of the Dead. So, and I wouldn't put Justice League in the top 130. In fact, most of his films are DC oriented films, and most of the DC films are okay. Like Wonder Woman is probably the best out of all of them, right? Um, but none of those I would put in the top 130. None of the Marvel films, none of the DC films or whatever, right? So anyway, but Yoshiaki Kawajiri has another film from 2000 that came out after this, and it's called Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust. All right, and that I would I would have no issue putting in a top 130 list either. All right, so search out that one and Ninja Scroll if you haven't seen either one of those films. They're really good anime films. All right. Okay, next up after that is 1984's horror comedy, and when I when I'm going through my list, I realize that that's my favorite type of horror. It seems is like horror with a bit of comedy to it, right? I really like that B style of horror where they don't take themselves too seriously. There's a bit of humor in the horror, right? And this one is like right up that uh, um, lane aisle, right up that aisle. It's directed by Joe Dante. Came out in 1984, and it's Gremlins, which is basically a story about a father who wants to buy his son a really cool Christmas gift. So he's in the Chinese quarter of, is it New York City, I think, or Chicago? It might be Chicago, I think. And he's at this old Chinese shop, and this old Chinese man has this pet. It's called a mogwai, It's like a furry, really cute furry creature, right? And he attempts to buy it off the Chinese guy, but the Chinese guy won't sell it to him until he's really convinced. And he finally sells it, but he tells the guy there's three things that he needs to do with this mogwai. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen. Number one is you have to keep the mogwai out of sunlight, especially direct sunlight, or it'll kill it. All right. Number two is you can't get the mogwai wet, and number three is you can't feed the mogwai after midnight. All right. So what happens is obviously what's going to happen, right? Is so he brings it home, he gives it to his son, and his son is really excited with this creature or whatever. But then they don't take care of it properly, and it gets wet, and it starts popping bubbles, and things are popping out of it, and these things turn out to be what's called gremlins, and they create havoc in the town that they live in during Christmas, and it's quite a fun film to watch. Any film with Phoebe Cates in it, great stuff. All right, so she has a charm on screen that is very attractive. So that is Gremlins. Now there is a second Gremlins. It's not as good as the first one, and I don't think it was directed by Joe Dante, but I could be wrong. It might have been directed by Joe Dante actually, but it wouldn't make my top 130 list like Gremlins did. All right, so from 1984, Gremlin, Joe Dante, it's number 128 on my list. So now we'll go up to number 127, which is a Cecil B. DeMille film from 1956, and that's The Ten Commandments, starring Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston plays Moses, and basically it's a film about the Exodus, right, where the Jews are under the foot of the Egyptians, and they finally get free. Moses frees them. They go to Mount Sinai, and Moses brings down the Ten Commandments, and it goes on from there, right? So it's one of the epic films came out in the 50s. When all those huge epic films Hollywood was doing because of the advent of television, right? Television came out, and people were watching television at home, and so the movies had to think up a way of getting you into the theater. And so what they did was they made these big, huge blockbuster films, Ben-Hur, and The Ten Commandments, and other films like that for like a good decade. Huge budgets, huge numbers of extras, like thousands of extras in a lot of these films, right? I mean, now they just use CGI or whatever, but back then, imagine the guy that would have to organize that to get like thousands of extras doing certain things in films to make those epic wide screen shots, right? Anyways, it's a great film. Charlton Heston does a great job, and so does Yul Brynner. So one of the classic films from the 1950s. All right, so that's the Ten Commandments. Directed. It's actually Cecil B. DeMille's last film, if I remember correctly, and he actually did an earlier version of the Ten Commandments in the 1920s. I think it was a silent film. Was it a silent film? You tell me. I think it was a silent film, black and white film from the 1920s. He did the Ten Commandments, and then his last film that he did, he decided, let's update that, put it in color, and make it a big, huge epic. Quite a great film, right? So, all right. And there's only one other film probably that I would consider by Cecil B. DeMille to put in the top 130 of my list, and that would be The Buccaneer from 1938. So go search out that film if you wish. All right, so The Ten Commandments from 1956 is number 127 on my list. Next up, number 126 is a Fritz Kirsch film from 1984, and it is called Children of the Corn. Now, this is not, a lot of people probably wouldn't consider this, one of the greatest films of all time, but it's one of my all-time favorite horror films, based on a Stephen King story, and it's about these kids who kill their parents because a child comes into, is like kind of like a man child who talks about this evil creature that lives in the cornfields, who wants this town, and he convinces all the children of this town that he's a messiah. They're waiting for this creature to come, and this creature wants them to kill all their parents. So basically, they kill all their parents, and now Linda Hamilton and her husband are driving across country because of, I can't remember the reason why, but they end up in this town, and the children have changed all the signs around, so they try to, once you go in, you can't leave. It's like all the signs are directing you to go back to this town, right? So they're driving around in circles. Finally, they go in, into the town, and they're attacked by these children, and then there's a big fight between those two adults and two of the kids that didn't believe in the monster or whatever because they're too young or whatever. Those four go up against you know the Messiah kid and his enforcer, who was looks like about a 15-year-old redheaded guy with a big knife, right? Anyway, so it's a quite a fun film, scary film, and it always gave me the creeps because you don't think of children in that way, right? So imagine if you children that you see on the street would attack you, and all of them would attack you, right? It's like you don't think of them as being harmful or whatever, right? And you can underestimate them. You think they're small, and if one child attacks you, you could easily stop them. But if like 50 of them attack you, you understand what I mean? So it's kind of creepy. It gives you that kind of creep, like The Birds does. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, where you don't think birds are really harmful because they're small, right? And but if you've ever had a bird attack you, it's a pretty freaky experience. Let's put it that way. And if you live in Canada, the Canada goose is one of the ones that maybe has attacked you. If you have been attacked by a bird, a Canada goose maybe the bird that attacked you, right? Because they are a vicious bird, right? So anyway, so that's what Children of the Corn, number 126 on my list, directed by Fritz Kirschen. He didn't have any other films that would make it, right? So next up after that is another anime film from 2004. It's number 125 on my list, and it's called Appleseed, and it's directed by Shinji Aramaki. All right, Shinji Aramaki. And what blew me away about this film was the actual anime in it. At the time, in 2004, when this film came out, and I watched it on home video on DVD, the anime in it was, I mean, it was beautiful. It was clear. The colors were great and everything. And basically, the story was interesting as well. It's basically about a girl who's in the military fighting in a war that ended, and she thinks it's still going on, but then she ends up, uh, being captured or whatever and brought to this city. And in this city, there's no war anymore. But basically, it's populated by these kind of android characters um, that have a short lifespan, and the city is run by a prime minister, her military attaché, who runs the military, a general, and this group of elderly people, right? And it's all overlooked by this artificial intelligence computer thing. I can't. It's called Gaia, right? So, and everything is running pretty good, except that there's an underground terrorist group that doesn't like these, humanoid artificial humans or whatever, right? And they have no way to procreate, but there's this program called Appleseed, hence the name of the film, that will give them the ability to replicate or give birth or whatever, right? Anyways, it goes on from there. The story is pretty good, but the anime itself, the actual anime is just mind blowing. Even now, when I watch it, it's like, wow, that is so well done, right? And that's what attracted me to it in the first place. So that's Appleseed, all right? And it's directed by Shinji Aramaki, and he doesn't have any other films that would make the top 130. And it's number 125. All right, so next up after that is number 124, and that is Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th from 1980. This is the first slasher film on my list. All right, so basically everybody knows Friday the 13th. It's all about Jason Voorhees. Anyways, um, everybody just calls him Jason, right? And he's a big, huge guy, and he has a big, huge knife, and he just kills indiscriminately, right? Well, this film doesn't have Jason in it, except at the end. There's like a postscript to the film where the girl is dreaming and she's on the boat, and then Jason comes out of the water and grabs her. Anyways, it's about a campsite called Crystal Lake where there's a bunch of teenagers that go there because they're thinking of reopening Crystal Lake because there was some sort of tragedy, and the campsite has closed down and they want to reopen it. The problem is as they're cleaning it up and trying to reopen it, they're starting to be killed by some mysterious person or whatever. They're hunted down and killed, right? So most people have seen this film. Would I ruin it if I tell you who the killer is? But anyways, it's not till the second film of Friday the 13th that you see Jason, right? So it turns into a slasher. Originally, it was anyway. So I won't tell you who the killer is or whatever, but that's basically it. Kind of campgrounds, a bunch of counselors on the campground, young counselors, and they're all being murdered. All right, so it's a fun film. It's probably, well, you'd probably say Halloween from 1978, the John Carpenter film, would be the breakthrough of the slasher type of horror film. And then this one, and then you got Freddy Krueger with all the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Then a bit later after that, you have Chucky and all the Wes Craven films with Ghostface. Is it Ghostface? Anyway, so but this is the early part of the slasher film's rise to popularity, right? So anyway, so that's Friday the 13th from 1980, directed by Sean S. Cunningham. He doesn't have any other films that would make 130 list, and it's number 124 on my list. All right, next up after that is number 123. It's directed by Holly Dale, and it's a Canadian film, and it's called Blood and Donuts, and it's from 1995. And this basically is a vampire film, but I'm not a huge fan of the main type of vampire story, right? Where you have Dracula or some other vampire that goes around attacking people and sucking their blood, right? That kind of thing. And then you have some sort of vampire hunter that hunts him down and kills him by putting a stake through his heart, right? That kind of idea, right? Although, well, I am a fan of that kind of film, but I like, you know, deviations from that main kind of Dracula storyline, right? Um, and this is one of those types of film. All right, so this one stars Gordon Curry and Helen Clarkson, and basically there's a donut shop owned by a woman, and there's a cab driver that likes to come to that donut shop. What happens is there's a vampire who gets woken up after being asleep for 25 years, and he starts hanging out at this donut shop. And what he does is he doesn't attack or kill humans. What he does is he ends up helping out the the owner of the donut shop by killing all the rats that are hanging out in her donut shop, and he like sucks their blood. That's where he gets the blood that he lives off of, is from rodents and animals, right? So vermin or whatever, right? And he helps the cab driver as well because the cab driver is indebted somehow to these this mob boss, this criminal boss of the city or whatever, right? Uh, that's bleh. I can't talk right now. And that's actually David Cronenberg plays that character, right? So you actually see David Cronenberg in this film, right? So and that's about so you have a vampire who doesn't attack humans but helps humans, right? And there's also a twist in the story that comes later because there's somebody searching for this vampire for the last 25 years since he's been asleep, right? So there's a twist to it as well. So it's a really fun film. It's kind of humorous as well as being, like a horror film. And it's interesting to see a vampire. I've never seen a vampire played in that way in a film before. It's quite unique, and I think you would enjoy it as well if you can find it. It took me years to find this film just on DVD. I don't think it has a Blu-ray release. So it's called Blood and Donuts. It's from 1995, and it's from Holly Dale directed it, and she doesn't have any other films that would make 100 top 130 list. Okay, all right. So next up after that is my favorite Tim Burton film. It's a toss up. I go back and forth between Edward Scissorhands and Mars Attacks, but in this, I decided to choose Mars Attacks. Right now, most people think this is a stupid film, and it is. It is a stupid film, but it's a Tim Burton stupid film, and it's quite charming and it's really funny. Okay, any film that makes me laugh, guttural laugh, like from your belly kind of laugh, you got to like it. Maybe it doesn't come off that way for other people, but it did with me. And basically, the the thing that got it for me was the playing of country music makes the Martians brains explode, right? That got me, right. So, and I mean, there's so many stars in this film. Robert Downey Jr. Let me look, because there's just too many of them. But it's like Michael J. Fox was in this, Sarah Jessica Parker, Pierce Brosnan, um, Jack Nicholson. I mean, there's so many stars in this. Like even the smaller parts, Jim Brown was in it. Even the smaller parts in this film are played by huge stars, right? So it's I guess everybody loves Tim Burton in order to do that. But basically, a movie based on Topps. There was Topps put out collector cards called Mars Attacks. You collect all these Mars Attacks collector cards, and then Tim Burton took those collector cards and decided to make a movie out of them, right? And it's basically Martians come to Earth and start taking over Earth, and there's a big fight back against the Martians, but the Martians are too strong, or whatever. And there are these little cartoon character type of Martians with brains that are covered with a glass helmet kind of thing because they can't breathe um, human air or Earth's air or whatever, right? So, but when you play when you play country music and they hear it, their brains explode. So you see exploding brains inside these, light bulb shaped pieces of glass over their head, right? It's hilarious. At least I find it hilarious. Anyway, so, and overall, it's a great film. But I guess most people would probably pick, Edward Scissorhands over Mars Attacks as maybe Tim Burton's best film. But saying that, all right, so that's Mars Attacks, all right. Other films by him that I would have no issue putting in a top 30 list are Beetlejuice from 1988, the Michael Keaton film. That Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. I don't know if you've ever seen the film, but anyways, Batman. Um, he did a bunch of the Batmans, but the first Batman, that that was huge during that time, right back in 1989, because there hadn't been a Batman film before that, right? Uh, you saw, you watched maybe reruns of the old Batman TV show, Batman and Robin TV show, but there was no Batman except for animation Batman up until then, and so having Batman on the big screen was huge. I mean, the merchandising for that film was just crazy. Every second person had a Batman T-shirt on. If you go back in that time when it was becoming the 1990s or whatever, right? So everybody had a Batman T-shirt. So anyway, so the Batman, Edward Scissorhands from 1990, Ed Wood from 1994, and I would also put Sweeney Todd in there from 2007. That is a really good, one of the weirdest musicals I've ever watched in my life was Sweeney Todd, and Johnny Depp does a great job in that film, right? So, all right, so those are the films by Tim Burton that I would have no issue being put in the top 130 list, but I decided to choose Mars Attacks. It's one of the funniest films I've ever watched in my life. All right, so okay, so next up over that is number 121, a Curtis Hanson film from 1990, and it's called Bad Influence. Now, you probably thought I was going to say L.A. Confidential from 1997, but I did not. I actually like Bad Influence better than L.A. Confidential. And this film stars James Spader and Rob Lowe, and it's basically James Spader plays this wimp, who gets pushed around at work, and he's engaged to a domineering type of woman who has like a rich family, and he's being pushed around by them and everything, and he ends up meeting Rob Lowe, who's like a criminal type of dude who likes a hedonistic lifestyle, and so he kind of befriends James Spader, and they go out a few times, have some drinks, and have some fun. And Rob Lowe kind of pushes James Spader to come out of his shell and become more of a man, right? What hit it for me was there was a part in it that just made me laugh my head off. How mean it is, or how cruel it is, right? So, like I said, James Spader is engaged in this film, and what happens is he's out on a night of debauchery with Rob Lowe, and Rob Lowe has this girl that he knows or whatever, and he sets James Spader up with her, and they go back to his apartment, and they, screw around. Rob Lowe videotapes it, and then Rob Lowe is going to an engagement party at James Spader's fiance's parents' house, and he ends up putting that videotape into the television, and the parents and the fiance both see James Spader screwing this girl or whatever, right? So, and it's all, anyways, it's quite funny because James Spader's kind of a wimpy type of guy, and he complains to Rob Lowe that he's engaged. He has nothing better to do. He doesn't really want to do it, but he's got obligations and all this, and so Rob Lowe takes that as as a sign of to do something about it, stand up, right? Anyway, so it obviously what's going to happen is Rob Lowe's an ass, right? And he takes advantage of people. James Spader is a nice guy, and slowly but surely, James Spader doesn't want to be drawn into more and more hedonistic crap that Rob Lowe is into. So he kind of starts pulling back from it, and Rob Lowe doesn't want him to pull back, right? And then there's a clash, and that clash goes from there, and it's quite eventful after that. So this film is quite a fun film to watch. I always liked James Spader as an actor, all the way back to what was it, like 16 Candles, where he plays that ass. And I think it was in 16 Candles he plays that ass in high school. Anyway, so and he's been on TV shows since, but I'm not going to get into that part. I just like him as an actor, and I really like this film because of him as an actor and him standing up for himself finally at the end of this film. I always get a bit of joy out of that as well. So it's called Bad Influence. It's from 1990. It's directed by Curtis Hanson, and the only other Curtis Hanson film that I'd have no issue being in the top 30 list would be his neo-noir film, L.A. Confidential from 1997, 7 years later. That is a really good film too, and most people would actually say that's a better film than Bad Influence if they saw both of them. But I kind of like Bad Influence better. All right, so that's number 121, Bad Influence from 1990, directed by Curtis Hanson. All right, next up is another vampire film. All right, and it's directed by Tobe Hooper, and it's from 1985, and it's called Life Force. And basically, Life Force is a film, and like I said, I like this straightforward vampire type of film, but I also like, those ones that are, you know, not, straightforward, not those typical type of vampire film. This is one of them, right? This is basically vampires in space, but they don't suck your blood; they suck your soul, right? So basically, a European space shuttle finds a alien spacecraft in space, and they bring it down to Earth because there's two. I think it's two, or is it three? It's been a while since I've seen the film, but there's two of them, two aliens that are in stasis, like in pods or whatever, in stasis, and they bring them out and bring them to life. And what they end up doing is starting sucking everybody's soul, right? And it goes on from there. And the guy from uh, anyways, the special effects in it are pretty cool. I mean, they're kind of dated now, but when the vampire sucks your soul and you turn almost into a skeleton, that was really creepy at the time. That well, when I watched this film, it was really creepy at the time, and it quite impressed me. Right, so I don't know how well it would stand up, like 40 years later, but it was pretty cool at the time. Now, most people, if they're going to pick a Tobe Hooper film, would probably pick, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as his best film, right? It's one of the all-time great horror films. But that film from 1974 is one of the first horror films I saw that turned my stomach. There's sections in that film where it's really difficult to see, and all you're hearing is the screaming of the girl and the chainsaw, and you have to use your imagination on what's going on, and you can just picture it, and anyways, it turned my stomach. So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a great film, and I would have no issue if somebody put it into a top 130 list. I just didn't do it. Another one by Tobe Hooper that could easily make a top 130 list is Poltergeist from 1982, the film, but the little girl getting sucked into the television. That was a pretty creepy film as well, right? So Tobe Hooper is one of the great, horror directors, right? So that is number 120, Life Force from 1985, directed by Tobe Hooper. All right, next up at 119 is my all-time favorite, kind of like romantic film, high school romance type of film, and it's from 1987, and it's directed by Howard Deutsch, and it's called Some Kind of Wonderful. All right, and this came out um, when you had these teen sex comedies, you had these teen romance type of romantic comedies and things like that. A lot of them starred, Molly Ringwald, these teenage films, right? They were big in the '80s, right? So this one was one of those, but Molly Ringwald wasn't in this one. This one stars Eric Stoltz and Leah Thomas and Leah Thompson and Mary Stuart Masterson. And basically, Eric Stoltz plays like a working class son of a working class father who goes to high school. And after high school, he works in a garage. He works with his hands. And what he's doing with the money that he's earning is he's putting it away into bonds to save money to go to college, because he would be the first of his family to go to college, because his father is really pushing him to become the first man in the family to ever go to college, right? So he has that pressure on him. But what he's interested in is he's at school, and he's kind of like the outcast, kind of poor guy, and there's this rich clique of popular kids, and one of them is the Leah Thompson character, who actually comes from the poor side of the tracks, but because of her beauty and her personality, she gets invited in and becoming friends to all these rich girls as well, right? So a lot of the stuff that she has is given to her by rich girls, her clothes and her earrings and everything else, right? So Eric Stoltz looks at her as he's like quite interested in her because she comes from his side of the world, but she's in the other side, and he kind of feels bad for her, but he's also attracted to her. So what he does is he decides that he doesn't want to feel small anymore in a world where everybody seems to be bigger, and so what he does is he asks her out on a date. And because she's having a fight with her boyfriend at the time, who's another rich asshole who drives around in a Corvette, and he's like hitting on freshman chicks in high school. And Leah no, Thompson notices that, but she doesn't really do much about it because even though she's in that group, she could be easily ostracized from that group because she really isn't part of that group, right? Because she really does come from the other side of the tracks. Anyway, so she wants to make him jealous for being an ass and fooling around with other girls. So she says yes to Eric Stoltz to go out on a date. Right now, Mary Stuart Masterson is Eric Stoltz's best friend. All right, and she's kind of like a tomboy. She plays drums and she hangs out, and her parents suck or whatever. She comes from a broken home and all that, whatever. Right. So and you can tell that she is really in love with Eric Stoltz, right? But Eric Stoltz has his eye on Leah Thompson, right? And so they go out on a date, and other things happen, and da 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 da. Da. And what I always really enjoyed about this film was that it's the intestinal fortitude of Eric Stoltz to do something out of the ordinary. Like most people just pussyfoot around in high school. If you like somebody, you don't say anything because you don't want them to know that you like them, and you don't have the balls to go up and ask them out on a date or whatever like that. And I never really like Eric Stoltz. I see a lot of me when I was growing up in him. I came from I grew up poor basically, and but I never really let that stop me when it came to asking girls out or whatever, right? So I got that, I got that intimidation. I see all my friends are too. Anyways, I related to the film and I really liked it because of that, that intestinal fortitude it takes to go and ask a girl that you like out, because of the fear of rejection, right? So, and in the end, he gets who he should have had in the first place. So, anyway, so that's one of my favorite all-time, teen romance films or whatever, right? High school films. It's called Some Kind of Wonderful, directed by Howard Dutch, and it came out in 1987. And probably another film by Dutch that I would have no issue making the top 130 is Pretty in Pink, starring uh, Molly Ringwald. That was a very good film as well, and it's from 1986. All right, so that's number 119. Let's go to number 118. And 118 is a Kevin Smith film from 1999, and that is Dogma. And it stars Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and it's basically they play these two angels that have been thrown out of heaven by God, but they found this loophole in Scripture or whatever that gives them the ability to go back into heaven, but if they actually do that, that then it means that God is never wrong. God is always right. God is omnipotent, omni whatever, omni everything, right? So He doesn't make mistakes. So if they go back to heaven through this loophole, then they're showing that that God is not infallible, and that will just bring down the whole structure of the universe and make everything be obliterated out of existence, right? But they're still going to do it. So basically, this is about those two angels trying to get back into heaven, and God sending a person to stop them from doing it, right? And uh, it's quite a fun film. If if you're a student of theology, world religion or whatever, Christianity, it's fun to watch, see how they kind of manipulate, the tenets of Christianity in this film, right? And some of it's quite hilarious. The most being that you actually get to meet God in this film, and it's Alanis Morissette. So uh, that kind of that kind of made me laugh. So anyway, so most people probably wouldn't pick Dogma as the film by Kevin Smith. They'd probably maybe pick Clerks or maybe Mallrats, because that's a more atypical Kevin Smith film where it's all about fun and comedy and da da da, and cultural references and things like that. Um, so Clerks from 1994, Mallrats from 1995, and Chasing Amy, which is another Ben Affleck film, but he falls in love with a lesbian, and all the the comedy that comes about when you get attracted to a woman who's not attracted to men, right? That's quite an interesting film as well. And actually, Criterion put it out as one of the Criterion Collection, Chasing Amy from 1997. So those three films. If you chose any Kevin Smith film out of those four films, any one of those in the top 130, I would have no issue with. It wouldn't seem out of the ordinary to me, right? All right, so that is number 118. Number 117 is another Canadian film, and it was directed by Gerald Potterton, and it came out in 1981, and it's an animated film called Heavy Metal. Now, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, there was a you had Mad Magazine, you had Cracked Magazine, but you also had a more deviant type of sexual oriented magazine called Heavy Metal, where it showed different stories in it, like a Mad Magazine or whatever, but it's more adult oriented content, right? Um, and it's all about sex and violence, basically, right? So they decided, Potterton and others decided they were going to make a film about it, and you hear a lot of Canadian voices in it. You hear John Candy has a voice in it. John Flaherty, a lot of the SCTV guys are in this film doing voices. Basically, it's an anthology of stories in cartoon form, with the main thing is this green ball that is pure evil that travels around, and wherever it travels to, it creates evil and violence and bad shit happening, right? So, but there's one main story, and that's with a girl, a swordswoman, um, and her bird-like creature that she flies on, and that's the main attraction of this film. That animation of that is really good, and it's sexy as well, and it's made for adults, right? So it's quite fun to watch that. Where if you know me, I really like any type of action film or whatever where the lead character is a female that goes kicks ass. I always enjoyed that, right? And this is right up my alley when it comes to cartoon, with that woman with the sword, right? So it's a great film. It made my list at 116. Um, and Gerald Potterton did a great job with this film from 1981, but he does not have any other films that I would list in the top 130. All right, so that's Heavy Metal from 1981. There was actually a sequel to this called Heavy Metal 2000, but it's not very good. So you can buy this in you can buy it where you can buy the film, both films on one Blu-ray package. I've been looking around for that, but all I've been able to find so far is the DVD of Heavy Metal, right? So All right, so that's number 117, Heavy Metal from 1981, directed by Gerald Potterton. Next up at 116 is Lady and the Tramp, and it is directed by Hamilton Luske, Clyde Geronimi, and Wilfred Jackson. And they actually did a bunch of Disney films. Um, but I decided, okay, I was going to have you got to have a Disney film in your top 130, right? So I decided, well, it was a toss up. It was between Robin Hood, Lady and the Tramp, 101 Dalmatians, The Jungle Book, but I decided to choose Lady and the Tramp because it's the most charming out of all of those films, and it's from 1955. Everybody knows Lady and the Tramp. That scene with the two dogs at the back of the Italian restaurant eating spaghetti meatballs, and they pick up a piece of spaghetti and they're sucking it, and then they end up kissing. Right? That was like a magical moment. And these guys, these three guys, Jackson, Geronimi, and Lusk, also have did Fantasia. They did Cinderella. They did Alice in Wonderland. They did Peter Pan, which was another one I was thinking about, maybe Lady and the Tramp, Peter Pan. Not sure. And they did 101 Dalmatians. So from 1961, Peter Pan from 1953, right? So they had one, two, three, four other films that they made for Disney, which could make the top 130 list as well, right? So that's Lady and the Tramp. It's number 116 from 1955. Okay, so next up is 115, and it's from 1979, directed and written by Fred Walton. And it's called When a Stranger Calls, and this is like the film version of that old story, the girl and the man upstairs or whatever. It's like an urban legend or whatever. But this is one. When I watched this, I was like maybe 12, 11, 12, 13, 14, around that. And when I watched this film, it scared the living crap out of me. It's basically about a babysitter, a teenage girl who's babysitting kids, and she gets a phone call from a guy, and he's heavy breathing, and he's going, "Did you check on the children?" Right? And he's kind of freaking her out, right? So she calls the police and everything, and he calls back again and everything. But the whole thing, which freaks me out, is her going upstairs to check on the children, and the children are like slaughtered. And then she gets a phone call from the police, and the police are saying that the killer is calling from inside the house. All right. And once you knew that the killer is actually inside the house calling her, whoa, now that really freaks the living crap out of you, right? And that just blew me away on that film. And it's always been in my memory ever since. So I had to add it to my 100 top 100 list, or top 130 list, because it's one of the freakiest films I've ever watched, right? Like makes you uncomfortable in your seat type of film, like get out of there, that kind of thing, right? So it was a crazy film when it came out in 1979, and yeah, it quite impressive. All right, so Fred Walton doesn't have any other film other than When a Stranger Calls to be put into a top 130 list. All right, so that's number 115, When a Stranger Calls from 1979, directed by Fred Walton. Next up is my all-time favorite sports film, and it's directed by Barry Levinson, based on a book by Brian Malamud. I think it's Brian Malamud. Anyways, it's called The Natural. It came out in 1984, and directed by Barry Levinson, like I said. Now, this film stars Robert Redford, and he's a baseball player. And basically, he's going to go to the major leagues and break every effing record in the major leagues because he's the greatest baseball player of all time. Now, on his train trip to go try out, I think it's for the Chicago Cubs, but don't quote me on that. The train stops in this little town, and there's another baseball player there who's like the Babe Ruth character. I can't remember what his actual name is in the film, but he's like a Babe Ruth character, right? So he has a girl with him, and she's basically a psychopath, all right? And the reason why she's with Babe Ruth, we'll call him Babe Ruth, even though it's not Babe Ruth, is because she has it hell bent in her head to kill the greatest baseball player of all time, and she thinks it's the Babe Ruth guy. All right, so she's there, and she's going to kill Babe Ruth, right? But it just so happens that the talent scout that's with Roy Hobbs, who's the Robert Redford character, they set up he boasts about his protege, and so they say, okay, well, let's go out and prove to see who's better. So Babe Ruth grabs a bat and Roy Hobbs grabs a ball, and they go out there, and Roy Hobbs basically strikes Babe Ruth out easily on 3 pitches. So then the attention of the girl moves from the Babe Ruth character to Roy Hobbs, and now they're on the train continuing going, and the girl shoots Roy Hobbs, right? So he gets shot, and then he no longer makes the major leagues, and he disappears. Then the film jumps forward 20 years or however many years, 25 years or whatever it is, and now Roy Hobbs is an older guy, and he's deciding that he's going to take a shot at the majors before he is really old and can't do it, right? So he does, and it's bittersweet because you see he still has the talent that he had when he was a kid and when he was going to break every record on the planet, and now he's an older man at the end of his baseball life, let's say, and you see what happened to him over that period of time, right? So it's kind of like triumphant in a way, but it's also tragic in another way. So it has all that range of emotions that you feel when you're watching this film. Now, you don't really have to like baseball in order to enjoy this film. Like most sports films, you don't really need to like the sport that the film is about, because usually the film is something bigger than the actual sport itself, right? So there's usually some sort of human story to it, right? And there's some great baseball films out there. Baseball is my favorite sport, so there's great football films. There's great sports films in general, but I like baseball films best, and I think this one is the best one. Like you have Field of Dreams, you have Bull Durham, you have Eight Men Out, you have some other ones, but I think this is the best of all of them, and it's The Natural, directed by Barry Levinson from 1984. Now, Barry Levinson is quite a good director, so there are other films that I would put in the top 130. I wouldn't have an issue with it, right? Diner from 1982, that conversation movie set in the diner is it's an extremely good film. All right, Good Morning Vietnam, that comedy starring Robin Williams, is another really good film. Rain Man with Tom Cruise, and when you're trying to think of a name, it always Dustin Hoffman, or Dustin Hoffman plays an autistic character, and he does a really good job at it. Wag the Dog, which is a political satire film, and that film is hilarious. If even if you don't like political satire, Barry Levinson did an extremely good job with that Wag the Dog film. Very, very funny film. All right, and from 1997, and An Everlasting Peace, another comedy from 2000 about hair pieces. It's pretty funny as well. So I would, if I didn't put The Natural in there, any of those films, if I put in the top 130, I wouldn't have an issue with it, or somebody put it there, right? Barry Levinson's a great director. All right, so that's number 114. Barry Levinson's The Natural from 1984. Next up at 113 is a French film. All right, so in this film, a lot of people probably wouldn't choose this film. It's directed by Luc Besson. All right, so next up at 113 is La Femme Nikita from 1990, directed by Luc Besson, and it stars Anne Parillo. Parillo? Is that how you pronounce her name? It's a French film, French action film, and Luc Besson. I consider Luc Besson as like the the 1990s onward, as probably the greatest French action director uh, of all time, right? So he has two films that are really great, La Femme Nikita and Leon the Professional. A lot of people would probably choose Leon over La Femme Nikita, but you know me, I really like lead female characters in action films, and this is right up my alley. This is basically about a girl who has a boyfriend. They're both drug addicts. They break into a pharmacy to rob the pharmacy, get narcotics, and the police arrive, and the boyfriend is shot, if I remember correctly, and his gun goes somewhere, and she picks it up and she shoots the police officer and kills him. And so she ends up in jail, getting the death penalty. But the government decides they want to do something else with her, so they fake her death and bring her to this facility and train her to be an assassin. All right, so So she learns how to become an assassin, a female assassin. So she has teachers to teach her how to shoot, teachers how to behave, teachers how to be sexy in order to attract a mark, and all this other kind of stuff, right? And if she doesn't do it, then they just kill her because she's already dead already, right? So this is basically a training of her becoming an assassin. It's quite an interesting film, and I would highly recommend it. I've watched it numerous times. Now, he does have two other films, Luc Besson, that could make the top 130 very easily. That is Leon the Professional from 1994. All right, and that one is basically another hitman film, but this one is about a man who teaches, a teenage girl on how to become a hitman, right? So, and also the film The Fifth Element from 1997 that Bruce Willis and others, kind of like science fiction film, right? That is really good as well if you haven't seen that one. All right, so that's Luc Besson, La Femme Nikita from 1990. It's number 113 on the list. All right, next up at 112 is a Stephen Daldry film, and this one is a feel good, fun film. It's about a working class family in, is it England? I think it's in England. And there's a boy, there's a son who father's wants him to learn how to box, but he has no interest in boxing. What he wants to be is he wants to be a ballerina. And if you can think of a working class family with a tough guy dad or whatever wanting his son to be a ballerina, it's kind of like, anyways. So there's a humorousness, if that's such a word, just in that situation, right? And but Daldry does a really good job in getting that. And his best friend, even though he's not gay, he has a best friend who is gay. I mean, the boy has a best friend who's gay, likes to dress up in women's clothing and stuff. It's really funny, and you come to see how the father kind of goes from being disappointed to becoming proud as he sees how interested his son is and how well he does in ballet, right? So it's quite a good film if you haven't seen it, but it's the only Daldry film that I would put in the top 130. All right, so that's Stephen Daldry's Billy Elliot from 2000, and it's number 112 on the list. All right, next up is another Dracula film. All right, and this one is from 1974 and directed by Paul Morrissey. Now, when I saw this film, it was called Andy Warhol's Dracula, and there was another film called Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. I mean, they renamed it, I guess, using the Andy Warhol name to sell it. But actually, the film's real name is Blood for Dracula. All right. And this is number 111 on the list. And what attracted me to this film is another story. So Dracula is actually the character in the film. It's not a different, vampire. It is Dracula. But the thing about it is he's in Romania, right? That's where Transylvania is, in Romania, right? So he's in Romania and he's dying. And the reason why he's dying is because in this film, vampires can only suck the blood of virgin girls. All right. So, and the problem is with the sexual revolution of the 1960s and 70s, the invention of the pill and women not being not saving themselves for marriage, let's put it that way, like the big sexual revolution that happened during that period of time. Dracula is now finding it extremely difficult to find any virgins to suck blood from, right? So he's basically starving because he can't find a virgin in Romania, all right? So what the film is he's got to travel, and he's traveling because they found him a virgin, I think, in the United States or something. So he's traveling to the United States so that he can not die, right? So looking at Dracula, usually it's like a horror film, and Dracula scares the living crap out of you, and you never want to meet him. He's actually a tragic kind of figure, like a Macbeth kind of figure in this film, where it's extremely funny that you know Dracula is going to die because he can't find virgins anymore, right? Sexual promiscuity is so blatant in like post 1960s Europe that he can't find any virgins and he's going to die. What a pathetic and tragic way for Dracula to die is because he can't find a virgin, right? So it's quite humorous when you think about it, but you do feel sorry for Dracula.
one of the most evil characters up there with like the monster of Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These characters that are like like loathsome, and every film you watch about it is going about trying to kill them, but they're so strong and supernatural, right? So, but he's being brought down by the pill, right? So it's quite a funny film, right? So even though it's not meant to be funny, it is kind of humorous, and you do feel bad for the poor bloodsucker, right? So anyway, so that's Blood for Dracula from 1974, directed by Paul Morrissey, and Paul Morrissy doesn't have any other films that I would put in the top 130. So let's move on to number. So that was number 111. So let me move up here. Number 110 is another film that probably most people wouldn't consider uh, making like the top 100 or top 130 list. But this is the great thing about the variety of film, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen this film. I don't know if you know about this film, but it's quite a charming film, and I identify with it really well. Like you do some kind of wonderful identify with My Bodyguard from 1980, directed by Tony Bill. All right, so this film is about a boy, all right, whose father is like a manager of a high-end hotel, I think in Chicago, if I remember correctly. And he lives out of this hotel with his grandmother. I don't know where his mother is not in the, and he gets driven to this inner city type of school in a limousine, and therefore he becomes a target. All right, and he becomes a target by Moody is the name of the bully. All right, Melvin Moody. All right, so Moody sees this guy get a limousine, and he targets him because he knows the guy's rich or whatever. Right, so Moody and his minions, like his two buddies or whatever, corner him in the bathroom and tell him that, okay, you're going to be giving me your lunch money every day if you want to survive, right? We'll protect you against all the big bad guys that are in this school when it's actually them that are the big bad guys, right? So he doesn't want to pay Moody extortion, right? So he doesn't want to pay his. So he's new to the school, but he starts learning. He's in a class, and this big, huge guy comes in who's played by um, one of the Baldwin brothers. All right, is it Alec Baldwin? Uh, anyways, it's we'll just call him one of the Baldwin brothers. All right, so Baldwin comes in, sits down, and everybody is super scared of this guy, and he asks why, and the reason why is because it's rumored that he's a murderer. He killed his younger brother, shot him with a gun, right? And so everybody thinks he's crazy, right? So he's a loner. He doesn't hang out with anybody. He leaves school as much as possible. A lot of times he doesn't show up for school. So the McPeace character, who's the richer kid, right? We'll call him McPeace. He decides that that rumor is all a bunch of bullshit and everything. So he decides he's going to befriend Baldwin and see if he can convince him to be his bodyguard to protect him from the Matt Dillon character, the Moody character, right? So so he befriends him, but the guy basically tells him to go fuck himself, get away from me, kind of thing. But he kind of grows on the guy, and then they do end up becoming friends. And then Matt Dillon leaves him alone. But Matt Dillon, he's moody, he's a bad guy. He goes, well, he needs to do something about this because this can't stand. Because now other people in the school are telling Moody to go fuck themselves because if McPeace doesn't have to pay him, then they don't have to pay him, right? And so there's this big insurrection going on about it, and he's not getting any money anymore, right? So what he does is he takes the money that he's extorted from these kids and uses it to pay for this big, bald, tough-looking guy to go beat up the Baldwin character, right? And that happens, and then everything goes back to the way it was before. But then there's a big fight between McPeace and Baldwin, but then they make up for it and everything, and he learns about what that situation was. Did the guy kill his brother or not, or whatever done? It was this big cathartic thing, and then McPeace actually, Baldwin beats the shit out of the bald guy, And that gives McPeace the courage to defend himself or fight the Matt Dillon character, the Moody character, and then he beats up Moody, right? And then everything is right with the world, right? So growing up the way that I grew up, my mom had a bit of what's called wanderlust, and I was in numerous schools all through grade school. And when you're the new person all the time, you are targeted by bullies in the school, right? And I got sick of it. So, I made a promise to myself when I went to this school that I went when I think I was like maybe 9 or 10 or whatever. And if there was a bully in that school and he decided to target me, I wasn't going to put up with it. And I didn't. And I kicked the shit out of the guy. All right. And I got suspended and I got a problem with it, but I was never bothered again. Right. So I understand the point of this film. And, um, I relate to it really well. And I found it quite enjoyable to watch. Right. So it's called My Bodyguard, directed by Tony Bill from 1980. It's a great film. Most people wouldn't put it in their top 100, but I did. All right. So uh, take a look for it if you can find it. All right. So that is now Tony Bill didn't have any other films that I would put in the top 130. All right. So next up is number 109. And this film is from 1985, and it's another horror film. It's directed by Lamberto Bava, Mario Bava's son. And it's produced by Dario Argento, and it's called Demons. All right. And this film I watched when I was in my early 20s, went to the theater, and maybe that is the reason why, but this movie actually takes place in a theater. So there's this theater group that gives out these free tickets to go see this screening of this horror film or whatever. So everybody shows up, but the reason why they're there is because they're actually going to be food, all right? Because there's these demons that attracted everybody there so that they could lock the doors and eat everybody that's inside the movie theater. Now you're in a movie theater when you're watching this about a movie theater, right? So it's like situational scariness. Do you understand what I mean? So you start getting creeped out because you're in a theater as well, right? So and it was a brilliant film, and Baba does a really great job in it, and the makeup and the effects in it are really good, and it just scares the living crap out of you. This film, so I was quite impressed with it, and I think you will too if you haven't seen it. So it's called Demons from 1985, directed by Lamberto Bava. Now he doesn't have any other films that I would put in the top 130. So let's move on to number 108, and that is probably what most consider the greatest, teen sex romp type of comedy from the 1980s, and that's Fast Times at Ridgemont High from 1982, directed by Amy Heckerling. All right, now there's three films from the 80s that are like sex comedies that were all great. All right. The most politically incorrect one is probably Porky's, directed by Bob Clark. But then you also had Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and you had The Last American Virgin was another one. All right. So I don't have Porky's on my list because I do have Bob Clark as a director on this list for Black Christmas. You'll see it as we go up higher. But Porky's is probably my all-time favorite comedy of all time, right? So but Fast Times at Ridgemont High is really good as well. Now, the thing about Fast Times is, my daughter's showing up, it has a moral message to it, which makes it a very good film. And the message is it's called Fast Times because that's what's happening in high school when girls and boys are getting together to fool around all the time, and it isn't about emotions, and people's feelings are getting hurt, and it has nothing to do with love or anything like that. So basically, the film centers around a couple of guys and a couple of girls, and one of the characters, Phoebe Cates, is like dating this college guy, and she's all, sophisticated and everything else, and she has a Jennifer Jason Leigh as a best friend, and Jennifer Jason Leigh looks up to her because she's so sophisticated and everything, and so she decides she's a virgin. She decides because of Phoebe Cates, who's had sex lots of times, that she's going to go out and have sex, and it ends up turning out to be a pretty unpleasant experience for her. Anyway, so she realizes that all the bullshit of having an older boyfriend and having sex all the time and all that is not really cracked up for what it actually is. And she would rather date this geeky looking guy who actually likes her and wants to treat her with some respect. And so they, by the end of the film, get together. And so it's got that kind of message to it that, yeah, don't get into the fast lane when it comes to, sex and drugs and all that shit. Uh, Life has more meaning than that, right? But also, what made this probably put this movie over the top for a lot of people is the Sean Penn character, Spicoli, who's like the comic relief to this film. But I mean, he just grabs a hold of you, and his character just, and Eric Stoltz is in this as a buddy of his. There's some scenes in it that are freaking hilarious where you're going to laugh your ass off because of it. Like the part where Spicoli is at home and he's, high on grass or whatever, and he calls up his buddy Eric Stoltz, and they're on the phone, and he takes his shoe and he whacks his head with it and asks Eric Stoltz what the sound is, and he goes, I don't know. He goes, it's my skull, right? And that's, I mean, you have to be there, but it was hilarious. That and where when he orders a pizza when he's in history class, that's another funny scene on it. But overall, it has a moral message to it, and it's kind of like a snapshot of what the 80s were like for high school kids, right? So it's pretty accurate, let's put it that way. Amy Heckerling doesn't have any other film that I would put in the top 130 except for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is number 108 on the list from 1982. All right. So next up after that, number 107 is a film from 1973 directed by Richard Fletcher, starring Charlton Heston. Oh, let me get a drink. And it is called Soylent Green. All right. So this is a science fiction tale. It's taking place in the future, and basically, what Soylent Green is what makes this film great. All right. So the whole movie you're watching it's got that science fiction 70s feel that a lot of the films during that time, like Planet of the Apes or Logan's Run, that kind of feel to this film. But at the end, when you find out what Soylent Green is really grabs you and it goes, whoa, okay. And then you always remember this film, right? So it has that. There's certain films that are average, but then when the ending comes, it puts them into the above average category just because that ending is, so surprising or mind blowing or whatever, right? This is one of those films. And I don't want to wreck it for you if you haven't seen it. So just watch it. It's number 107, like I said, Soylent Green from 1973, directed by Richard Fletcher. And Richard Fletcher has two other films that I would have no issue being put in the top 130 either, and that is The Narrow Margin from 1952 or Compulsion from 1959. So Fletcher was around a long time by the time he did Soylent Green. It's actually at more of the end part of his career than the main area of his career. His main area was in the 50s, right? So, and with the Narrow Margin and Compulsion, two great films that you should watch as well, right? So that is 107, Soylent Green, 1973, directed by Richard Fletcher. Next up, number 106 is a Canadian film, another Canadian film, but the director isn't Canadian, but I think the financing was Canadian. That's why they consider this a Canadian film. It was made in Canada, financed by Canadians, I guess. Anyways, it's called Cube, and it's from 1997. It's directed by Vincenzo Natali. All right, so this film is kind of like a horror mystery type of film, and basically, it's about a group of people caught in a maze that's shaped like a Rubik's cube. Basically, if you can think of a Rubik's cube, but instead of having nine squares on each side, you have a bunch more, and it moves around like a Rubik's cube does, but it's not, the inner pieces move as well, so it's not like it's only one piece around like a Rubik's cube. There's pieces inside pieces or whatever, right? So, but basically, this film is kind of like a mystery. Person wakes up and he's in this square room, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet square room, and each wall, the ceiling, and the floor each has a door to it or a window that's boxed. That's maybe like 2 feet by 2 feet or whatever, right? So people wake up in this cube, and they start moving from room to room, and they kind of start meeting up with each other. The problem is that they have to figure out a way to get out of this cube, but each time they move into a new room, some of these rooms are booby trapped. And at first they think that uh, the cube is stationary, but it isn't. Each room moves around. So if you think the exit is that final room that's over this way of the 25, you know, cubes or whatever that are there, well, that room won't be there. It'll move like this and move down, or move this way or move this way, and everything's moving around all over the place, right? So how are they supposed to escape? Well, what you also learn as the movie progresses is that each person was picked and put in that cube for a reason. And it might be the reason because they're a leader, like one guy's a cop. There's another person who's a mathematician, if I remember correctly. And they all have a certain skill that maybe will help them into escaping this cube, right? So, but nobody knows how they got there. They just kind of woke up, all right, in different rooms inside this cube, right? But they slowly figure out how to get out of it. And does anybody get out of it? Well, I'm not going to tell you. You have to watch the film because that's part of the interest of it. And there was like sequels to this film, but this film is the film that you want to watch. It's called The Cube from 1997. It's a great film, and it's directed by Vincenzo Natali, who did not have another film that I would put in the top 130. All right, after that, number 105 is Westworld from 1973. All right, this stars Yul Brynner, and basically it's directed by Michael Crichton, the author, Michael Crichton. Interesting, I didn't know that he was a director as well, but I didn't know who directed Westworld when I watched it, and I've watched it a few times. It's basically about a world, or the United States at the time or whatever, has this technology to create like androids or robots or whatever. And basically, there's a theme park rather than an amusement park with roller coaster rides and everything. It's a theme park where you have these different um, areas where you can go on vacation. So you go on vacation, you pay these guys money, and you go in. And Westworld is one of these. You have like a futuristic world that you could live in for a couple of weeks, or these other type of themes of these worlds or whatever, right? So Westworld is like a time period during the expansion of the West in the United States, where you had all the gunslingers and the sheriffs and the small towns moving west or whatever, right? And it's basically that type of thing. So you go, it's like the Wild West, and you go live there for a couple of weeks on vacation, right? And you interact with all these different characters that are put there for your amusement, and they're all like kind of robots or whatever, right? And now all of them have been programmed not to harm you, but they have certain roles, and they bring you on adventures, and you get to shoot people and other things, right? It's really realistic, right? The problem is that the Yul Brynner character ends up having a malfunction of some sort, and then that not killing guests thing goes out the window, and he starts shooting people, right? And then it all turns into a big fucking mess, right? So it's quite a fun film to watch, and Yul Brynner does a really great job as that killer robot, right? So if you haven't seen the film, it's quite fun. I would suggest you watch it. All right. Now, Michael Crichton doesn't have any other film that I would consider putting in a top 100, 130 list. Just Westworld was good enough, right? All right. So number 104 is a film from 1985 directed by Tom Holland, and it is called Fright Night. Now, Fright Night is another vampire film, but this is kind of like a humor slash horror type of film. And it's basically about this teenage boy who lives in a house, and he realizes his next door neighbor is a vampire, and nobody believes him, okay? And this next door neighbor is dating his mother, all right? So he knows that that the vampire is charming his mom in order to get her blood sucked, right? And he's got to stop it, and somehow he doesn't know how to stop it because nobody believes him, right? So what he does is he watches this TV show that's called Fright Night, and it's about this actor who was in movies like years before as a vampire hunter, and now he kind of hosts this horror show on TV. So so the boy is going to go find him and see if he'll go kill the vampire with him or whatever, right? So that's basically the premise of the film. So you have a guy that isn't a vampire killer; he just acts like a vampire killer on TV, and the boy doesn't realize that he's not really a vampire killer, but there's these vampires in his town that he's got to kill. And anyways, it's all pandemonium after that, and it's really fun to watch, right? So and Tom Holland also is the guy who directed Child's Play, the the Chucky character with the little knife running around, um, and that was quite a fun film as well, right? So either film is fun to watch. I kind of had a toss up between Child's Play or Fright Night to put on this list, but I went with Fright Night because I actually like Fright Night more than Child's Play, even though Child's Play is quite a fun film as well. So that's Tom Holland's Fright Night from 1985, and it's number 104 on the list. All right, so now we're at 103, and this film is another Canadian film. All right, so and this is directed by David Cronenberg, and it's called Scanners, and it's from 1981. Now, David Cronenberg has a huge list of films, those horror, body horror, and everything else type of films. And I don't know if everybody would pick Scanners as the one to put on this list, but I chose it because it's mind blowing, literally, right? So, but basically, it's about certain people in the world that have this ability to manipulate your mind with their minds, all right? And the the climax at the end is really impressive, all right? So it's like when I watched it originally, when I first watched it, it's like, wow, that's kind of a cool premise or whatever. But then the ending was like literally mind blowing. All right, so um, if you haven't seen Scanners, try to find it. It's in the Criterion Collection, if I remember correctly. Is it? I think it is, right? A lot of Cronenberg's films are in the Criterion Collection. And I think Scanners is one of them that's in it. Now, I had a toss up between Scanners and Rabbit because Rabbit was the first Cronenberg film I watched, and that was kind of freaky film as well. It's basically about a girl who was in a motorcycle accident, and she has that motorcycle accident near this experimental hospital where they're experimenting with skin grafting using animal skin to put on human beings. And so they decide to do that to that girl to save her life or whatever. The problem is that the skin that they used from the dog had rabies. And so then she ends up getting this skin graft and develops this weird poker sucker thing that comes out of her armpit. And what she does is she is basically a vampire, and she's like a horny vampire basically, and she goes and she like seduces you, and then she sucks your blood or whatever with this thing that comes out, and what you end up doing is you end up getting rabies and start foaming at the mouth and attacking other people, and then it just spreads everywhere, right? So it's quite a mind blowing film. But I decided with Scanners because I enjoy Scanners just a little bit more. That's called The Rabbit. But of all the films that David Cronenberg has made, these would be the films that I would have no issue being put into a top 100, 130 list. And that's Shivers from 1975, Rabbit, which I just talked about, from 1977, The Brood from 1979, Videodrome from 1983, and many pick that film as his best film. Um, The Fly from 1986. Probably Scanners and Rabbit are probably tied for my favorite all-time Cronenberg films, but The Fly is like a really close um, second. The remake of The Fly from 1986 with what's his name? I can't remember his name. Anyways, then Dead Ringers from 1988. A History of Violence from 2005, and Eastern Promises from 2007. Those two crime films. He went away from horror, Cronenberg did, and decided to do two crime films starring Viggo Mortensen. And those two films are really good as well. So those are the films I would have no issue being put in the top 130 from David Cronenberg. So that's number 103, Scanners from 1981. All right, number 102 is a Robert Altman film called Gosford Park. This is a film, there's that type of film where everybody who's watched it has highly recommended it. Yet when you look at it, you go, I wouldn't like that film, and then so you don't watch it. But then you're bored one night and decide, okay, I'll give it a shot and I'll watch it, and then it blows you away. That is Gosford Park. It's basically about a whole bunch of people going onto an English estate to go bird hunting, and then there's a murder that happens, and then it goes on from there. All right, and that's all I'm going to tell you about it because this film is extremely good. Robert Altman is an extremely good director, and I think this is his best film. Although others would pick maybe Nashville was probably his best, but Gosford Park, extremely, extremely, extremely good film. It reminds me another film like that would be Sideways. All right, so where okay, it's about wine tasting and wine country, and why the hell would I want to watch that film? And then you watch it and go, wow, that is an extremely good film as well. Gosford Park is that kind of film. All right, directed by Robert Altman. I didn't write the date of it down. When did it come out? 2001. So it's a 2001 film directed by Robert Altman. It's 102 on my list. Now, Robert Altman is a great director, so obviously there's going to be other films that people could have chosen or I could have chosen to put on this top 100 list, and it wouldn't look out of place. And those would be Macabre and Mrs. Miller from 1971, The Long Goodbye from 1973, Nashville, which many people choose as being his best film, from 1975, Three Women from 1977, and The Player from 1992. Any of those films. All right. So that's number 102. Gosford Park, directed by Robert Altman, came out in 2001. All right. Next up is a Tom Tykwer film from 1998, number 101 on my list, and it's called Run Lola Run or Lola Rant. All right. It's a German film in the German language. So you're going to be seeing subtitles, but basically Tykwer does an action film that has so much movement in it. It moves. It's rapid. It's rapid, but there's no cars in it. All right. It's about a girl running to her boyfriend because he's threatening to rob a grocery store because he needs to $10,000 or however much it is to pay this criminal boss that he owes money to, and if he doesn't pay him, they're going to come after him. So he's going, you need to get me this money, Lola, and you need to bring it to me within the next 15 minutes or whatever at 1 o'clock, I think it was, or I'm going to go in and rob this grocery store to get the money to pay the guy, right? And so what happens is Tykwer goes through a whole bunch of scenarios on this film, and that's the interest of this film is so she's at her apartment, she gets off the phone, and she's got to go to her dad to ask her dad because her dad is a lawyer and he's rich or whatever to the money to give to her boyfriend so her boyfriend doesn't become a criminal and rob a grocery store, right? So she has a very limited amount of time of doing it. So you see her run out of her apartment, run down the stairs, run into the street, run, and different things happen to her. So one time she runs down the street and then there's a dog in her way and that slows her down and she doesn't make it in time to get to the grocery store, and then her boyfriend goes in and robs the grocery store and gets killed or something. So then it goes in reverse and goes back, and then she runs down, and this time she jumps over the dog, but then there's a car that gets in her way that stops her for 30 seconds, or she gets to her. Anyways, there's a bunch of different scenarios where they repeat. There's like a loop doing this, and little things change over it, and anyways, and then there's a resolution to it at the end. And Tykwer even throws in some animation where she turns into actual cartoon when she's running, and these other kind of visual effects that happen. And it's like a brain teaser kind of thing where you're thinking, okay, yeah, and Tykwer teaches you that how sometimes just little thing can like screw up your whole day or whatever, right? Like you need to do something and then the metro isn't on time, right? Or the person that's supposed to pick you up at this time is 10 minutes late and then this happens and that happens, right? All these little things that you have no control over can really decide a big difference in your fate, right? So it's quite a fun film, number one, and number two, it's it makes you think a bit as well. So now Taika only has one other film that would probably make anybody's 100 list, and that's The Princess and the Warrior from 2000. That, as well as another really good film by Tykwer. So number 101 is Run Lola Run from 1998, directed by Tom Tykwer. All right. So now number 100 is a film from 1982. All right, and it's directed by Paul Bartel, and it's Eating Raoul. All right. So this film, which actually has a Criterion Blu-ray, so is a black comedy. All right. It's very funny, but it's also very serious. It's not meant to. They it takes itself seriously. It's not meant to be funny, but it is funny. All right, and it becomes very hilarious when you know actually what's going on in this film, and it's so outrageous that it just, like, you're laughing your ass off at it. Like, it's like, wow, that was an impressive film. Gross, sick, but still impressive, right? So, but that's what a black comedy is, right? So I don't want to ruin the story for you if you haven't watched it. Watch it. It's quite funny. It's kind of B movie ish, and it's not action or anything like that. It's more drama, but have the patience to watch through the whole film. You'll be really rewarded by it. All right, so it's called Eating Raoul from 1982, directed by Paul Bartel. Now, Paul Bartel is the gentleman who did two other films that I would put on a list of a top 100, and that would be Death Race 2000, which is that another black comedy where there's a competition of racing where you're hitting old women for points and everything else. Anyways, it's quite dark. And Amazon Women on the Moon from 1987 would be another film by Paul Bartel that I would have no issue being in the top 100. All right, so he's really good at the black comedy. That's Paul Bartel, Eating Rule from 1982. All right, and I'm going to stop it here because my voice is getting a bit rough. I'm still recovering from throat surgery. So we'll do a stop here, and then we'll do the top 99 in the next video, or maybe another 30 or 40 of them, and then we'll take another break. All right. So I'll talk to you in 1 second because this is going to end here, and then anyways, you know what I mean. So that's from 100 to 130 on my top 130 list, and we'll be back in a second. All right. Bye for now.